Let's talk to our studio panel now. That is Ros, Jason and Ryan. And we're going to start with Ryan because you're the man who's keeping us up to date with those exit polls. Tell us what you know.
Well, one interesting thing to know about exit polls is when somebody says that they want somebody who's experienced. Think about the mind of a voter. What they've done is they've gone in and they've voted for Hillary Clinton. Now they're asked, why did you cast your vote? They come up with some reason that they think fits Hillary Clinton. And then we extract from that they were actually looking for experience. But they chose Hillary Clinton for some other reason, actually. But they're just kind of telling us what they think we want to hear. It's kind of this weird talking to each other kind of situation here. But the exit polls, and you have to take them with a grain of salt because the rounds that I've obtained so far are from 5 p.m. So that a lot of people are still going to be voting. They're going to be weighting these things. They're often wrong. That said, it's interesting to know what people are telling exit pollsters. On the Republican side, it is looking as predicted to be a very big night for Donald Trump. The only places where Ted Cruz is competitive in a primary, we don't have them for caucuses because they're too small, Oklahoma and Texas. Now, Ted Cruz is from Texas. Exit polls only have him up by a few points, though, and that's well within the margin of error. The same with Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a very church-going state, and there is a difference between evangelicals and churchgoers. Right. You can be an evangelical who goes to church, but a lot of but a lot of evangelicals don't go to church, and those are very different people. Trump does fine with the evangelicals who don't go to church, but if you go to church every week, you do not like Donald Trump. That's what pollsters are finding out, and so that could help explain why Oklahoma is the only deeply conservative state, other than Cruz's home state of Texas, that's turning him away tonight. So far, he could still eke it out. Yeah, I mean, Cruz, Jason, has to win Texas. He absolutely has to. But even if he only wins by a narrow majority, Trump's going to take that as a victory, isn't he? He's going to claim it.
Donald Trump takes everything as a victory.
Yeah, that is true.
The entire process is a victory for his skill and his charm over the traditional way of running campaigns. But again, it becomes an internal battle because Ted Cruz says, look, everybody else needs to just clear out the room and make it a one-on-one battle between me and Donald Trump right now. That is what everyone wants to be able to say after tonight because they know that Trump is still going to be in the race. But we have to remember this. An exit poll is who wants to talk. So if you leave the voting booth and you don't feel like talking to the press, you don't feel like talking to a journalist, we don't necessarily know. And we recognize, and this is something political scientists see all the time, that oftentimes Republican voters are very skeptical and apprehensive about talking to the press. So we don't always know. Exit polls on the GOP side are sometimes less reliable than for Democrats.
They give us something to talk about. Let's face it. That is
right. And Trump voters in particular hate the press. So that could be another reason that they're undercounting some Trump support.
He could have a much higher margin than we know because they just refuse to speak to the press.
They don't trust us.
Yeah. I have to say, looking from the outside in, it's been extraordinary how much hatred Trump has for the media, yet it is the media and the headlines that have almost, put him into this position.
Yeah. Well, the media created him.
I mean, he pretends to hate the media because Donald Trump recognizes that going against institutions, whether that's big banking companies or whether that's Washington, D.C., or whether that's the press, it appeals to voters who feel like these institutions no longer reflect their values. He is a member of the press. He is a member of the very establishment that he criticizes, but as long as he can keep landing those punches, it works for him and a certain set of voters.
It's also immunity to fact-checking. So he can say, I've never been bankrupt, and the press will say, you've been bankrupt 4 times. That's the press. They're out to get me. So now all of a sudden there is no kind of neutral messenger that people can go to and get facts about Donald Trump, and that is precisely how Donald Trump wants it.
And he's playing on that because basically the media's reputation in this country is probably outdone only by that of the U.S. Congress. Lawyers have a better reputation than journalists have in this country, again, because it goes to, are they paying attention to my concerns? Are they paying attention to my suffering, to my struggling? You hear this on a public affairs show that runs 7 days a week here in the United States where people get to call in and get to say, here's what's happening in my life. I don't think anyone cares. And so in order to basically get people to actually be motivated enough to turn up at the polls, and we're seeing across the country people having to wait in line on a primary day, waiting in line, that's unheard of. He's motivated them to actually come and show their frustration by repeatedly ignoring the messengers, by repeatedly ignoring the institutions, by questioning their credibility. And people are actually turning that into action, which is casting a ballot, is something I don't think that we've ever really seen in modern times.
And one other thing to really understand about sort of the American population in general, there's a difference between educated voters and politically educated voters, right? We have lots of people who have an education in America, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand that there's 3 branches of government, what legislation means, and how it works through. And also, Americans have a tendency to get news from places that will reaffirm what they already believe. So if you already believe in certain conservative principles, you're going to go to one network. If you believe in progressive principles, you're going to go to another network. And these two groups don't overlap much anymore. So it's very easy for Republicans or Democrats to pretty much lie and say that any outlet that does not already support me is out to get me, and people won't pay attention.
Right. Which means that the press can't do much about Donald Trump. Even when Donald Trump does something in full public view on the Sunday shows,
right.
He was asked by CNN's Jake Tapper if he would denounce KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. He spelled it out for him in case he didn't know what KKK was, because a leading KKK figure has been endorsing Donald Trump, and other white supremacists have been backing him. And 3 times he wouldn't do it. So this happened on live television. But his supporters have since said this was just a media setup. You know, in the past, he has distanced himself from the KKK. He'll do it again in the future. And so, even something as obvious as that happened, you know, in full daylight, his supporters can say, no, I don't buy it. I'm sticking with Donald Trump.
Quite extraordinary. More to talk about a little later, panel. Thanks very much for the moment.